Then he came again to Cana in Galilee, where he had changed the water into wine. Now there is a royal official whose son lay ill in Capernaum. When he heard that Jesus had come from Judea to Galilee, he went and begged him to come down and heal his son, for he was at the point of death. Then Jesus said to him, "Unless you see signs and wonders, you will not believe." The official said to him, "Sir, come down before my little boy dies." Jesus said to him, "Go, your son will live." The man believed the word that Jesus spoke to him and started on his way. As he was going down, his slaves met him and told him that his child was alive. So he asked them the hour when he began to recover. They said to him, "Yesterday at 1 in the afternoon, the fever left him." The father realized that this was the hour when Jesus had said to him, "Your son will live." So he himself believed, along with his whole household. Now this was the second sign that Jesus did after coming from Judea to Galilee. The word of the Lord.
Good morning, everyone. Before I start, I just need to say something. Troop 14. About 15 years ago, my friend Eric Geyer, the Geyers, invited my wife and I and our daughter, who was about 5, over to their house. And they had a home. They were renting there in the bottom of the Rogue Valley in southern Oregon, where I live. And their backyard, there was a rail fence alongside their backyard. And on the other side of that fence was a 100-acre meadow. And on the back side of that meadow was a group of black oak trees that grew around Bear Creek. And my friend Eric and I were sitting in the backyard. We're in Adirondack chairs. We're drinking tea, and we are in charge of watching our 2 daughters, who were friends, both 5 years old. And we're talking, and we're watching the girls play, and all of a sudden my wife comes out from the kitchen door, and she says, "Hey, we almost got lunch ready. How are the girls?" And you could just feel this sheer panic because we had been so engaged in our conversation. We had not been watching the girls. And so we both kind of looked around, and there, on the other side of the rail fence, sitting atop 2 horses, were our daughters riding across the meadow. Now, immediately, I turned to my wife and said, "They're fine. Go back inside." And then Eric and I scrambled over the fence and were just running in a panic because Eric didn't own horses, I didn't own horses, and as far as we knew, our daughters did not know how to ride horses. We start running across this field, and there in the shadows of the black oak trees, we see a woman with a cowboy hat on and a big brass buckle, and she comes out from the shadows and she says, it's okay, it's all right, they're safe. And we notice as we get closer that the horses are following a pathway that has been mowed into the field. And the horses are kind of walking along that, and we run up there kind of out of breath, and I say, "What's going on?" And her name was Jane, and she said, I'm a horse therapist. And I said, "A horse therapist?" "Yeah, I'm a therapist to horses." She said, "Well, what happens is people buy horses when they have no business buying horses. They give them as a gift, or they buy them for their kids, and they plan, okay, as soon as we get the horse, we'll build a fenced place where it can live, or we'll take care of it at some point," and they don't create the right setting. And so they take that brand new pony, that new horse, and they put it in their garage, or they put it in a barn until they get things set up. And then they don't get things set up. There's trouble in the home, they never build the fence, and that horse will stay there abused in that garage or in that barn, often drinking tepid water that smells like metal, often just being fed from the kitchen, oats or whatever they have. It'll live there half-starved, sometimes for a couple of years, until someone reports them, or they sell the home, or the family breaks up, and then they call me. And I said, well, what happens when they call you? She said, well, I have to go find this animal that's often been living in the dark for most of its life. And I try to bring it out and it won't come out. I have to bring 2 or 3 strong men to help me pull that animal because it wants to stay in there because it's all it knows. And we put it in my horse trailer and I drive it down to this meadow where they allow me to do my work. What happens then? She goes, it doesn't want to leave the trailer. So we have to drag it out of the trailer and put it in the field. And then I get in my camper and I wait. Wait for what? Well, a horse that has been secluded like that has been abused like that, doesn't recognize anything around it. And so it'll start crying for water, even though there is a creek right there. It doesn't have the metallic smell. It doesn't have the must of the barn or of the garage. And so it doesn't know it's water, and it cries and cries for me to find something for it to drink. Until usually, maybe 15 hours, sometimes 24 hours, it'll go down and put its muzzle in the creek, and it'll start to drink. And then it'll recognize, oh, this is water. And then usually it takes another day or 2, starving, hungry, before, out of desperation, it reaches down and pulls up the grass and realizes, oh, this is food. And then she said, then comes the moment that's the reason I do this work. She said, as soon as that horse recognizes it's in a world of food and water and sunlight, it takes off running. And it runs around and around this meadow, jumping and tossing its head because it's free. Now we know this story. We live in a culture that continually isolates, separates, divides us, puts us in technological garages and boxes where we sit with our own anxiety, our own depression, our own fears. And we know the message because our culture has given it to us again and again and again. You need to fix yourself. You need to calm yourself. You need to heal yourself. Maybe if you do the raw diet. Maybe if you do horse calisthenics or the horse enneagram, you'll find a way out of that garage, out of that darkness, right? You've got to figure out a way to heal yourself. But the whole point, and it's in all the music we've sang this morning and in the readings this morning, the whole point of the Christian faith is that you can't transform yourself. What we have to come to is surrender. And what we've been taught in this culture is that when suffering comes, work harder, try harder, double down. And then we do what we've always done and we get what we always get. And so then you give up. You'll get the Ben & Jerry's, the 6-pack, the Netflix streaming. Forget it. And we numb ourselves and distance ourselves. But the work of the Christian faith is to learn how to trust that beneath the suffering, beneath the darkness, there is that voice that says, all shall be well. So where did this survival structure come from? Well, we know where it came from. You remember, if those of you who were alive in the 90s, there was a famous writer called Robert Fulghum, and he wrote a famous book called Everything I Needed to Learn, I Learned in Kindergarten. Remember this? Best-selling book, and he became a speaker, and he went around to universities and talked about what he had learned as a kindergarten teacher. And after years of on the speaking tour, I heard him one time give a talk where he said, you know, when I would go into a kindergarten class, I would look at all the 5- and 6-year-olds and say, who knows how to draw? Every kid raises their hand. He goes, no, hang on a second. Who can draw a picture of a rhinoceros with wings flying up to the moon? Every kid's like, where's the crayons? I'll do it for you right now. No problem. Right? And then he'd say, okay, now who can sing? Every kid raises their hand. He said, no, wait, now hold on. Who can sing me a song of a frog who's wandering through the woods looking for Troop 14? And he said sometimes a kid would stand up and just start to sing right then, right? Every child could sing. He says, then I go to universities, and they have me go into classes, and I walk into the freshman class, and I say, who here knows how to sing? Maybe you get a couple hands up, and then they got to give you the little caveats. I only sing in the choir. I only sing my own songs, Who knows how to draw? A couple of hands. I only do still life. I only do my own cartoons. And then he says, I look at those kids, 18, 19 years old, and I say, what happened to you? What happened to you? Just 13 years earlier, you could all sing. You could all draw. And you know what happened to them. It happened to us, right? You brought the picture out, and they said, well, that doesn't look very good. You should find something else. You told them, I'm going to take English. You take English, you're going to be a teacher? You can't focus on reading and books. You'll never make money doing that. You come out and sing your song, and they say, yeah, I would just sing alone in your room. Right? And so you become smaller, and you learn that this is a culture of winners and losers, that you're in competition here, that you're going to be judged harshly on your appearance, on your achievement, on what you accumulate, and you better work hard. That your worth is based on what you do. It's based on your wealth. It's based on how you look. And so you start to shut down all these parts of ourselves, and you live in the survival system. The royal official in our scripture today is one of these people who was playing the game well. He was a winner. He had figured out how to have wealth, how to have status. He was part of Herod's government, the puppet government in Jerusalem that the Romans had set up. He had the right connections. He was making it. He could feel proud of himself. He was getting all the rewards of the culture. And then his little boy gets sick. And he goes to those he's connected to. Who knows a doctor? Who knows a healer? How can I fix this? And he uses those connections, and it doesn't work. And they say, what can money do? I'll pay money, whatever it takes. Who can heal my son? And it doesn't work. And then he hears, you start to get crazy. He hears, there's a healer. There's this guy walking around. There's something true about him. There's something loving about him. There's a healer. He's 20 miles away in Cana. And it says the royal official walked the 15 to 20 miles he had to walk. What do you think happened to that man walking? He emptied himself. He sat in that suffering. He sat pleading with God. His status didn't matter. His wealth didn't matter. His connections didn't matter. And he came into the gift of suffering, which is that it emptied him. It emptied him of everything he'd been taught to grasp and hold on to until he was just his naked, yearning self. And in that place of openness, of desperation, he could look at Jesus and hear, your son is healed, and I believe it. I believe it. He came back to that childhood trust that he had when he was little. I want to end with this image. A number of years ago, we went to the Oregon coast. That time in my life, I was traveling 90 days, 100 days a year. I'd be on the road. And I would feel disconnected from my family and my kids. And so one of those periods, we took a week at the coast. A friend gave us their home to stay in. And I decided, I had 3 kids, and one day I would devote just to one kid. It'd be dad and son day or dad and daughter day. Finally, it came for the day for my youngest, Grace, 5 years old. It's going to be our day. And so she wanted to go to the beach. So we went to Battle Rock Beach. This is outside of the town of Port Orford. And we go down there, and we're both so excited. The sun was out. The waves were rolling on the beach. It's just the 2 of us. We're going to just play all day. And sure enough, as soon as we get down, we drop our towels and bags, and we're running along the shore, and we're chasing the foam. And all of a sudden, we see a big rock right on the edge of the beach, and you can't see the other side of it. And we go up to the beach, and when the waves recede, we run around to the other side. And we're going to explore this other side of the beach, when all of a sudden we look down about 500 yards. There's a very odd sight. And we both kind of stop. We're trying to look. It's a car. And the car is right at the edge of the waves. And this is way down. There's almost nothing else on this beach. And the waves are kind of coming up to the back of the car. And there's a woman, and she's moving her body in this erratic way. And I see that she's in trouble, and she's kind of waving at us to come and help. But there's something strange. She looks disturbed in some way. And I immediately turn to my daughter and say, let's go back to the other side of the rock. She said, Dad, don't you see what's down there? And I said, yeah, I see it. She said, Dad, we need to go help her. And I say, Grace, she needs a truck or something like that to pull her car out. We can't do that. Let's go to the other side. She goes, Dad, you're spiritual. She said spiritual because she heard my title was spiritual director. She knew I had a master's in Christian spirituality. She'd heard this word. You're spiritual. And I said, well, yes, but the kind of way I'm spiritual, you pray for people and I teach people, I preach sometimes. I don't know how to get that. Dad, we're supposed to help. And so I sit there and she says, Dad, let's just run down there and see. And everything in me, I'm repulsed by what I see. My heart sinks. I'm actually disgusted by how this woman's body is moving there, and I know this is a troubled person. I don't want anything to do with this. This is my day with my daughter. And my daughter says, we need to go down there. So I start to go, Dad, we need to run. And so Dad, you're not running. Really run. And so we start running down there, and it's worse than I thought. We get there, the car is beaten up, the back tires are kind of maybe a quarter, a third down into the sand, the waves are coming up. This woman looks like she's been living in her car. In fact, when we get up there, she tells us, this is not just my car, this is my house. She's got a pit bull with a slobbery mouth that terrifies me, that she's like, no, it's fine. The whole thing is just out of control. And she comes up to me and says, can you please, this is everything I own, can you get this car out of the sand? And I said, well, I don't think so, Can you just try? And Grace is like, Dad, you can do this, try. So, I'm getting boards and we're finding driftwood and I'm putting it under the tires, the whole time knowing this is futile. And I'm putting the things under the tires, and then I get in, and the one's like, you can do it, and I'm saying, okay, and I put the thing in gear, it's an old Subaru, and it spins out and it digs further and the waves come up. And Grace is like, let's get more boards. And so we're getting more boards, and I am just kind of disappearing to myself. I'm so distraught. I'm so depressed by what's happening. I hate this, what's happening. And I start grabbing boards and I'm trying, but I just kind of go into automatic pilot and I'm trying, and Grace is saying, Dad, I know you can. Dad, keep trying. And the woman's crying and asking me to help, and I could tell there's empty bottles of alcohol in there, and I'm like, oh God, this woman's drunk. I don't want anything to do with this. And all of a sudden, 3 other little kids run up. And a grandmother comes up, and the kids are like 6, 7, 8. They're like, what are you guys doing? I said, we're trying to get this car out. We can help. And Grace goes, Dad, they can help. And they're like 7, 8, and 9. And I'm like, okay, you get more boards. And the grandmother comes over and says, this happens every once in a while. You're never getting this car out. I said, I know I'm never getting this car out. Tell it to these kids. And so the kids bring boards, and they're trying to dig on the other side, and we're putting the thing under, and then I'll get back in, and the car will kick the boards out and spin down in. And it's just back and forth. It's going like this. You know what Grace didn't know, what the kids didn't know? I have been in this scene so many times in my life. My mother has schizophrenia. And she would disappear in her car. And she'd be gone for weeks, sometimes months, and I would find her and try to get her back on her meds and try to get her stabilized, and I would never succeed. I knew this scene. I didn't want to be in this scene anymore. I didn't want to feel this kind of way of out of control and helplessness. But the kids kept saying, you can do it. And they kept bringing me boards, and I kept trying. Until a policeman showed up and said, you're never going to do this. I said, I know that. But, my daughter wants me to try, and this woman's in desperation, and I'm trying to help. And all of a sudden, Grace says, Dad, do you remember when we drove in and we drove by the bar? We drove by there's a shipping yard there, and there was a bar called Pitch's Bar. And I said, oh, looks like all the fishermen are at the bar. And then Grace asked me what a bar was. And there was all these trucks parked at the bar. And Grace says, what about the trucks at the bar, Dad? What if you called there? And I I said, well, I didn't bring my cell phone. And the policeman said, I have a cell phone. And so he hands it to me. And I look up Pitch's bar on his phone. And I call the bar. And I said, this Pitch's bar? Yeah. I said, hey, I'm down at the beach. Is there anybody with a truck who might drive down? It's like, oh yeah, that happens. Yeah, we'll send somebody down. I give the phone back to the police. About 8 minutes later, this giant truck shows up. It's got 2 big guys and an old grandma sitting in the front seat. They come out. They're 3 sheets to the wind. Ask your scout leader later what that phrase means. They come down. The grandma gets in the car. The 2 guys jump out, wrap a chain around the frame, get back in the truck, hit it, Grandma. She hits it. They run the truck. The thing pops up out of the sand, pulls all the way up onto the dry sand. The woman can't believe it. She falls to her knees. Thank you, thank you, thank you. The little kids run in a circle cheering because it was such an amazing sight to see. And I'm sitting there shaking, back in the trauma that I've known most of my life. And my daughter is sensitive to what I'm feeling. And she walks up and she hugs my leg. And she says, Dad. I say, yeah. She said, you're good. You're good. Right? And I heard it. How many times had I said that to myself? How many times did I preach sermons on it? But it took that breakdown, that helplessness, that losing control, to allow my daughter, Grace, to get a word in that brought me down into the deep truth and the deep reality that we're all seeking here. Amen? Amen.